Happy Mondays, of course. Before that, you heard Joy Division, A Certain Ratio and New Order. They are all Factory Records artists. The iconic Manchester label has become the stuff of legend, really. Joy Division, New Order, Happy Mondays, the Hacienda, 24-hour party people. It's all in there. But that is only part of the story. We're going to take a look into the untold story of the women of Factory Records now, the unknown treasures, often the function, it could be said, behind the dysfunction. Audrey Golden has written a book all about them, and she joins us now. Good evening, Audrey.
Hi, so nice to be here with you.
It's brilliant to have you on the programme. So the book is called I Thought I Heard You Speak, Women at Factory Records. Now, when did you first think these stories from these women it's something that we need to hear?
I've been thinking about it for quite a long time, but it was really when I first started buying factory records, the actual records, and collecting some of the ephemera and seeing these women's names on so many of the sleeves, on the Christmas cards, on other materials. And I thought, where are their stories? Their stories weren't written in any of the existing materials to date. And so I really wanted to find out about these women who seemed to play such an integral, and it really was integral as it turns out, role in the running and other aspects of factory records.
Yeah, so what other aspects, when you say running, what exactly were they doing?
Women doing so many different things. So women, of course, behind the scenes in so many different capacities. So women working in the office from the start on Palatine Road, also working in the office when the office moved to Charles Street in Manchester, doing work in New York as well. So doing all kinds of work, corresponding with licensees, handling the distribution of records, really keeping everything running, and really just putting the labor in. That's really critical to keep a label like Factory, at work and producing the kinds of sounds for which it has become known now.
I mean, I'm reading here they designed record sleeves, made films, music videos, DJs, played at live gigs. I mean, there was no aspect of that scene and that label that wasn't touched by the hand of a woman. Can you give us some examples?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I mentioned working behind the scenes, there was Tracy Donnelly in the office and Leslie Gilbert, but Tina Simmons as well, who became a director, had ideas for really keeping the label financially sound, but obviously her voice wasn't heard in ways that it really should have been. Penny Henry, an incredible woman in the early years of the Hacienda, doing incredible and really necessary work, like identifying the fact that the Hacienda needed a cloakroom, literally climbing onto the roof to replace material to prevent rain leaks. Can you say that about anybody else? And then Linda Dutton, another amazing woman working for Factory Icon, doing filmmaking work, rarely ever gets her due, and recorded some of the best loved Factory Icon films and recorded some of the best loved performances at the Hacienda. Why isn't her name out there? I hope it is now.
Why aren't women recorded and celebrated? It's interesting that we're talking about this book in just, the same 24 hours as Missy Elliott has been inducted to, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in America. Kate Bush has just got in there as well. It still seems surprising that, women get in there, but it's taken so long. Why aren't they on record for what they've done? That, their mark in history.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many different reasons. I think, giving it the most positive spin, I think there are so many kinds of sociocultural factors that, leading up to the point we are today, have just not led people to be as interested as they should be in women's stories and women's voices. And I think that's really the generous reading in some ways. And so a lot of the women who, have played critical roles in Factory, but also, have been so integral to so many aspects of the music industry more broadly, just really haven't gotten their due. But then in a kind of less generous reading, I guess I should say, I think a lot of people just simply don't believe women's voices matter as much. And unfortunately, the fact that so many women's voices have been excluded from so many histories to date means in some ways it becomes this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that these histories and legacies don't include women, or that women weren't critical to them. So I think it's really, actually really essential to kind of take a step back and think about the way certain biases play out and the way they prevent women's voices from being heard, because women have been critical in so many aspects of factory records, but so crucial to so many facets of the music industry more broadly as well.
Lindsay Reed, let's talk about her playing a vital part in the story. She's a co-founder. She was Tony Wilson's ex-wife. It was our household savings, she says in the book, that we used to make the first record. So she's such an integral part of this. But Tony Wilson was fantastic, but she was there right beside him.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my favorite parts from Lindsay in the book was where she told me that Factory was kind of like their baby. They didn't have a baby, and so Factory was their baby. And it really gave me this, new way of really thinking about the role someone like Lindsay, but other women were playing at Factory, and women professionals play in the music industry too, where you don't need to necessarily have a physical baby, but you're giving birth, as Lindsay suggested in some ways, to Factory records and doing all of this really critical mothering work in all of the different ways that, term has meaning to different parts of the label and to different musicians on the label and to all of these behind the scenes things that don't often get talked about or don't perhaps seem as sexy or cool as, other things that perhaps Tony Wilson and some of the other founders were doing more in the spotlight.
I mean, because they have been so sidelined in the writing of this story and other stories as well, I guess. I mean, was it quite difficult to do the research, to actually pin things down and find out who did what and then go back and find those voices?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I mean, I really felt in a lot of ways like I was playing the role of a detective or a private investigator, really trying to track down names, first of all, because so many of the names just simply aren't recorded in existing records of Factory, in any of the existing texts, in any of the films. And so first, it's really, a kind of detective-like deep dive into trying to find the names and then trying to track down the women. I did so many kind of bonkers things that I never thought I would find myself doing to try to get contact information for some of these women. And fortunately for the book and for what I hope is a new legacy of Factory through my book, a lot of that detective work really paid off.
The style in which it's written then, have you chosen to do that? You call it a piece of oral history.
Yeah. Oral history was really important for me for this book for a couple of different reasons. I mean, first, given that these women's voices have been so marginalized within existing histories or often excluded altogether, it was really critical for me to be able to have their voices shine, to really illuminate their voices and to really allow for a kind of reclamation of that kind of agency in the book. So the oral history form was really crucial in that aspect. But then also I find oral history to be a really democratic form that really suggests that in a broad history like this, there's no privileging of a single voice and no voices are subordinated to other, perhaps bigger voices. And so in that way, I think the book really highlights just how critical all of these women are in different ways and how their voices kind of come together to tell a new story.
It really is. And it's great that you have done this. It really, really is. I mean, you focused on Factory, but do you think that this is a similar story that can be told over the last 40, 50 years in music at other labels as well?
I suspect it really is a broader story. I mean, on the one hand, it really is a Factory story because there were so many women who did all kinds of work for and kind of around a label. And so I think these women really were just the backbone and the spine of making Factory records what it is in the cultural imagination. But I suspect these kinds of deep dives into other labels and indie labels would reveal that women were doing all of this work, or a lot of this work at least, as well. So I hope in that way, maybe my book serves as a kind of impetus to other researchers, other writers to think, wow, there are a lot of stories where I thought I had the definitive history, but in fact, I really need to take a step back, think about what's been excluded, think about who's been marginalized and how I might be able to tell that story in a really new and exciting way.
And I know you don't want to say one voice is more important than any other, but was there one story or a story you can give us now where you think, flipping heck, we should know this person's name?
So I mentioned Penny Henry already. I think she's really one of the women who, we really need to know her name. I can't believe she's been written out of a lot of the histories to date, just given all that work she did at the Hacienda early on. And then also just, still thinking about the Hacienda, Ange Matthews. Ange Matthews was manager, licensee of the Hacienda, and did so much amazing work there, and was the first woman to hold that job, and did it during some of the most difficult years of the Hacienda being open. So I really hope, their names really shine through in any future histories of the Hacienda or of factory more generally.
Well, you've done a brilliant job of going out there, digging up these names and, putting it in the history books for, the wonderful contribution these women made. Audrey, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. This was a real pleasure.
Audrey Golden there, and the book is I Thought I Heard You Speak, Women at Factory Records. It is out now. And this is Kath Carroll, also on the label England Made Me.
Yeah, I was just playing a little